Hey gang, welcome back to the Joy of Wrenching. I'm your friendly neighborhood mechanic. And today in the shop we got the 2014 F150 back in here, and it came in for something simple, a nice rear brake job. And part of that rear brake job is checking out the emergency brakes. And when I did that, I found a little problem. The problem is that this truck has a leaking rear axle seal. And so today I want to show you how to repair a leaking rear axle seal on a Ford F-150 truck. On the Ford F-150s, the emergency brake is not part of the caliper itself, which squeezes the pads. It's integral inside of this hat right here. So you have regular brakes, which are disc brakes, but the emergency brake is a old school drum brake it's inside of here. So to get to that, you just take this off and looky here. Here's the problem. See how wet this is inside? With grease. This is axle grease. And if you look back behind our hub surface here, look at that axle grease has covered our brake pads, and up underneath here you can see it's all wet and leaking out. A lot of times you'll see it really run down here in both the front and the back side of this backing plate. See over here you can see a little bit of wetness back here, but it wasn't super soaked or anything like that, so wasn't sure if that was a problem. But once we got that hat off, we definitely could tell. Let me show you on the other side what it's supposed to look like whenever you get this apart. Nice and dry in here, no leakage. So this side, this driver's side, is fine, but the passenger side definitely needs to be replaced. So the problem is that we have a seal on the axle shaft right behind here that is leaking. And in order to get to that seal and replace it, we're going to have to remove our axle. In order to remove the axle, we have to get inside of our rear differential here and release it. Now, before you do this job, you're going to want to do a couple of things. Number one, support the vehicle very safely. I've got it on this lift here, but I also put these jacks underneath it just to make sure that it doesn't wobble around. The other thing is that this axle is coming out this way, and so you want to make sure that you've got room. You're not right up against the wall of your garage and you get the axle out this far and realize you're not going to go anywhere. So here's your distance. You know, the axle's this long, so just kind of take a general measure and say, okay, it needs to come out this far. Am I clear? Yes, I am, at least in this case. So, you know, you don't want to find out, you know, when you're halfway pulling that axle out that you can't get it out. So we need to remove this differential cover, and when we do so, of course, all of the gear lube, which is filled up to about right here, is going to pour out. So you want to make sure that you catch all that. It's really nasty, and it will make a big mess if you don't have a good catch system. The way to remove this cover is, if you can see here, come look a little closer. There's a ton of RTV holding this cover on here, and so we're going to have to peel it off of there. But it's held on, in this case, by 12 half-inch bolts. Okay, so Ford still uses some of the SAE size bolts. In order to get to this cover, obviously we've got this ABS wire here, so just pull these things straight off. Remember where they go, and also, if it helps, you know, maybe just take a picture of where the bolts go that have that extended stud for that ABS wire to go on. The brake line here, you can kind of gently bend it up and sort of out of your way so that you get good access to. So let's get started by breaking these bolts loose. They're all half inch, sorry about that. So I'm just going to loosen them up, and then I'll use the impact to buzz them the rest of the way out. They shouldn't be on there too terribly tight, but because of the RTV and everything, sometimes they are a little hard to get started. Plus, it's usually a good idea to break bolts loose by hand, and then you use your electric ratchet or impact to get them out of the way a little faster. Before I take out the rest of these bolts, I'm going to go ahead and mark which ones are the ones that were the extended stud there, and that way I'll just keep that straight. And we'll go ahead and put our catch basin underneath here, but I don't anticipate that it's going to start to leak out when I just remove the bolts because of the amount of silicone or RTV that I'm seeing on here. But we'll go ahead and start removing these bolts. Like I said, I already broke them loose, so they should come out a little easier. And you want to leave one at the top in place so that when you break this seal, it's not the whole cover doesn't just fall down also. Now look at there, it's starting to already come loose and drain out, so that's good. It's actually good because typically you'll have to pry this open with a putty knife or something, get back behind it and kind of wedge it open. And when you do, it just all dumps out in a gushing rush and makes a big mess. So it's nice that it's coming out slowly like this because it won't be as big of a problem. We'll go ahead and finish off. And like I said, I'm going to leave a bolt up here at the top holding the cover in place. This guy right here looks like a good one to leave in place. All right, now we can get in here with our little putty knife back behind it. Just kind of wedge in and open it up just a little bit. Look at all of that grease coming out. Ooh, and it's stinky too. It's been a little while. I'm kind of surprised how dark that is, considering how fresh some of this RTV that's around the edge looks. All right, so now that that's drained most of the way out, I'm gonna go ahead and remove my final bolt here. And then I can take my cover down. There you go. We're going to go ahead and let this continue to drain out, but while it's doing so, we're going to go ahead and start to release the axle clips so that we can get that axle out of there and get to our seal. You're going to need to have your truck in neutral, and you can reach over around here and just turn the drive shaft by hand, or if you want to, you can get you a rag or something like that and put it on the gear here and try and turn it. But it's easier to turn by hand on the drive shaft than it is to turn this ring gear. And you want to turn it until you can see this bolt right here. This bolt is what retains this pin. And this pin has to be removed in order for us to get the C-clips out and remove the axle. This bolt is a 3/8 bolt, and so we're just going to break that thing loose, and it might come in handy to use a little gear wrench like this to go ahead and finish that, removing that bolt out quicker. Sometimes hard to get a socket in here, but once you get to the end of its threads, which there are not a ton of threads on these. Let me show you. Okay, once you get to the end of its thread, I don't know, there's 10 threads or so, you'll be able to remove this pin. Now that that pin is out of the way, we can push this bigger pin. All this does is go in there and lock into that, keep it from moving. So once we have this out of the way, we can go ahead and push this larger pin out of the way, which has to happen. Now I'm going to orient this, so we'll take this locking pin out, set it somewhere safe. You're going to reuse that. Now I'm going to turn the drive shaft so that we can see what we're doing a little better here. Sometimes this bigger pin will just fall out. Sometimes you'll have to tap it out a little bit. But basically, it's right in here, and you can see how it is right between the two axles. These are the ends of the axle shafts right there. And so we have to remove that pin so we can push the axle in and get the little retaining clip out. So let's see if this is just going to push out easy. So I'm pushing from above with my finger, and you can see I'm getting it to move just with finger pressure. At least I was. Now it's kind of hung up. So if that's the case for you, if it's wanting to be a little bit cantankerous, not want to or play along, then you can continue to rotate this gear around to where you can get a better angle on that pin and just sort of tap on it a little bit with something. Doesn't really matter what you use. I'm going to just use the end of this here ratchet maybe. There we go. All I'm trying to do is move that pin a little bit. Just enough to where I can get, just enough to where I can get back to the thing. So let me rotate this one more time back to where we were and see. You see now that that pin is sticking out enough. Look right here on this side of it. You can see where the retaining bolt goes in. So this retaining bolt goes in here when it's screwed in there, and now you can use that as leverage to work and wiggle and move this pin and pull it the rest of the way out. So you can look down through here and you'll see as I'm pulling this thing out how we'll be able to remove this larger pin. Let me go ahead and rotate this again just to a position where you guys can see. There you go. And all I'm doing is just pulling and working that thing down. Come on now, get out of there. It might help to give it a little leverage sometimes. Put this up in here and kind of push down on it a little bit at the same time. Oh, there we go. It was actually caught on these two flats. Once you get down to these two flats next to the axle, it wanted to stay in place. It wants to just hang up right there. So if you twist it like this to get it off those flats, then it will come the rest of the way out easier. Here it comes. Just like so. Almost there. Come on, baby. There we go. There we are. There's our pin. Okay, so now that we've pulled our pin out, our retaining pin for the axles, I'm going to go ahead and rotate this so that I can see everything good. And you don't want to rotate. Once you've got that pin out of the way, that pin is helping to retain all of these spider gears on the inside here. So you don't want to rotate your axles once you've got that pin out of there. What can happen is these spider gears will fall out. It's not the end of the world. You can get them back in there, but you don't want that to happen. So now that I've got this oriented like this, we don't want to rotate the axle, but we need to get this passenger side axle out. In order to do that, it's held in with a little clip. And to get that clip, we have to take this axle, and now that that pin is out of the way, I can push in on this axle. And as I do so, you'll see that axle shaft move in, and there is the clip that we need to grab. So let me get a little magnet. This is the easiest way to grab that clip. Once you get that thing pushed in, you can put a magnet on that clip. Well, it doesn't want to just come right off with my magnet, does it? No. So I'm going to get some pliers, and I'm going to pull that sucker off of there. All right, so let's try this again. The magnet just didn't want to pull it, so I'm going to get these little needle nose in there, and now we're going to pull it with a needle nose. All right, and notice the way it came off. This side here that was against the spider gear looks to have a different wear pattern than the inside does. So that might be just something to keep in mind. I don't think it matters which way you put it back in at the end of the day. It should hold either way, but we'll do it that way just in case. All right, so now we've got that C-clip removed, and we're ready to push this axle out. You can get in here with your hand and push it back out, or wedge it out with a screwdriver or whatever if you want to, but the easiest way is just to come over here to the actual axle and grab hold of it. Now remember, we don't want to rotate it because those spider gears will fall out. We just want to take that axle and pull it straight out. Now that that C-clip is out of the way, we can get this axle. I'm just going to use this little rag to kind of catch any of the nastiness that comes dripping out of this seal. And you can see where that seal has been leaking. And you just want to support this thing as you slide it on out. Here it comes. And there it is. There's your axle. And just take it and set it somewhere safe where you're not going to knock it over. And it's just easiest to stand them up out of the way. Here's what we're trying to get to, this seal right here. That's our culprit, and you can see where it's been leaking and running down and coating all of this stuff, and we're going to clean that up. So before we get too deep into this, I want to go ahead and clean up this area. Even though these brake pads are covered in gear oil, they can be salvaged. They're still usable. This is just a parking brake, okay? So once they're cleaned up, it'll still wedge out and grab hold and hold the vehicle. So what we're going to do is we're going to spray this area off really good with some brake clean. Before I do that, I'm going to stick this here, just a rag or something inside so that we don't get this brake clean inside of that axle tube. And then we'll just start by hosing this thing down real good, get all that old nasty grease and gear lube off of everything. We'll let that dry and do it a couple more times before we're done. But this will keep us from having to have the additional expense of new brake parts in here, because these are still good enough for what they are. All right, so we got the axle out of the way, and we're looking at this right here, which is our axle seal. This was what was leaking on this side. Now, for you sharp-eyed fellas, you're going to say that looks a little different than most F-150 axle bearing seal setups. The distance between the sealing surface and the bearing material is very near one another. And all of the stock trucks come with a bearing that's set back inside of this bore just a little bit further and take a seal like this one that's that wide, and it'll be driven in here. And so typically, if you've got a leaky seal, all you got to do is pry out this old seal, throw it away, and press in another one, and Bob's your uncle, you're ready to go. But in this case, this truck has 220,000 miles on it, and somebody's already been in here in the past and replaced these wheel bearings back here. And they've replaced it with not the stock wheel bearing, but one of these. This is called a wheel repair bearing, and it is an integrated bearing and seal system. It's got a seal back here on the back side, and then it's got a seal on the front side, and that gets driven in place of the old bearing and the normal stock seal. So normally, like I said, if you just had a leak here and your bearings were fine, which these bearings are fine, they don't feel gritty or anything like that, we weren't hearing any road noise, normally you could just pop off the old seal, put in a new seal. But because the seal is integrated with the bearing, we have to pull the bearing, this repair bearing, out and put in a new one. So that's what we're going to do. Hey guys, just a quick break in the program real quick. I just wanted to say thank you guys for tuning in. If you're enjoying this sort of thing, please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It doesn't sign you up for junk mail or anything like that. It just means that YouTube will know that you guys are enjoying this, and they'll try and show it to more people, so we can just, reach a greater audience. I'd appreciate it. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the action. So in order to get this old axle bearing out of here, which is integrated with a seal, you're going to need to get a tool like this. This is a seal puller, axle seal puller or axle bearing puller, and you can rent this down at your local auto parts store for free. So don't even bother trying to figure out a different way of doing it. Just get the right tool. Keeps the joy in wrenching. And it comes in a kit like this with multiple tips, and each of them has a different width that it's going to grab that bearing. And so you want to figure out which one you're going to need for your particular bearing. And so in this case, I'm going to be pulling this type of bearing. So you just put one, test it out, put one through there, spread it out. And what you're looking for is you want to make sure that when it's spread out on the back, that it's actually touching the metal portion, the outer portion of the bearing, and it'll actually pull that bearing and not just pop out the plastic guts or the bearing material inside. So in this particular case, I'm going with the larger of the three options in this puller kit. Well, let's get this old bearing out of here. So we just tilt this thing like so, slide it in the middle, and it'll kind of, once you get to the other side of that bearing, it'll kind of fall back into its wider position. You may have to back off on this little retaining nut right there. There we go. All right. Now, once it's in place, you want to suck up this bearing. I'm sorry, this nut to the washer. That way it holds itself kind of centered up. We're getting there. It's a lot of threads, but it's good. Okay, so now, like I said, just kind of center it up there, and then take your slide hammer, and you're going to want to slide back, and the weight of this slide hammer is going to pull that old bearing out of there. In a perfect world, right? So this is where I mentioned you want to make sure that you got your vehicle well supported. Come on, baby. I used the second smaller size puller end, and we're going to see if it's going to help at all, or it might just pull the guts out of this thing. Let's see what happens. Yeah, as I suspected, all it did was pull some actual bearings out and seals out. So you got to go in with the larger one, or else you're not going to be able to get that thing out of there. All right, come on. Let me get that thing straightened up back there. You want to make sure that it's on the back side of that bearing as best it can be, anyway. Is that in there? I think that's in there. Okay. Let's go ahead and get this thing sort of centered up. Tighten up this a little bit. This isn't critical that you put this locking nut all the way up against here, but it helps it to stay centered up, which is good. Okay, we're almost there. Come on, baby. There we go. All right, let's see what's going to happen this time. Let me get a different angle again. A little bit more leverage. Okay, here we go. Oh, look, it's moving. See that gap? One more time, I bet it'll come out. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh, one more. There it is. Yeah. Woohoo. Score. All right. So you can see what's going on here. This is just centered up on the back side of that bearing there and yanks it out of where it was. And so now this one's out. We'll make sure that the inside bore of this thing is in good shape, and then we'll put the new one in. Okay, so the old bearing is out of the way now, and so we're going to put the new one in, and I'm going to just smear just a real thin little bit of a coating of some RTV right here on this inner lip on this one, just because there's a couple of little scratches in here. I just want to make sure that they never allow any leakage past them, and yeah, it's all just a tiny little bit there. And we're going to drive in our new bearing using the right size, which is going to be our old bearing. So this portion goes inward, and there's a little O-ring seal here, and that just sits right in place like that. And then this diameter, you can use a seal pull or seal driver if you want, but this old bearing that came out of there is the perfect size to sit on there. Now you'll notice there's a little bit of a step down here. This is a larger diameter. It's exactly the same diameter as the new one, but the inside's just slightly smaller diameter, and that's what I'm going to use as my driving surface. That way I can get this fully seated in there. So let's get started. So I'm going to set that on there just straight as can be, and I'm going to use a hammer to kind of go around the edges a little bit, trying to knock it in as straight as I can. Just want to look at it every once in a while and look at the gap and make sure that you're going in straight in the same amount on each side. And you can get like a flat plate or something to put over here and then strike it. That way it hits it all at the same time. Or you can just go around the outside circumference of it, tapping as you go. So it's starting to get in there, and now we're past that smaller diameter, and we're getting to that larger diameter of the outer portion. It's going to take a little bit more force. See, it's starting to sink in there. Just move around it. Make sure you're getting it nice and flush in there. All right, we're going good. Almost home. Okay. This side is the same as the other side. That's good. Now I'm starting to hear a little bit of a different bang sound. I'm hitting the outside of it. There we go. All right, we're nice and centered up. And you hear that solid sound versus that other one. That means that we're fully seated. And so this new bearing and seal assembly is in place. All right, so now our new bearing and seal is in place. These come with grease already, but you can put some grease in there if you want to. But you can see that's all nice and greased up inside of there. Now, before I put it in there, you want to look at this sealing surface or the writing surface here, this shiny part that I'm rubbing my thumb across. You want to make sure that that doesn't have any scores or anything that might tear the new seal. And if that looks good, like this one does, you want to take your axle and you want to center it up. Don't let it drag on the bottom part of this seal right here. Don't let it drag as you're pushing it in, because it could tear or pull that seal or wear it down a little bit. Once you get in all the way to the center portion, the weight of the axle is going to be pulling down on the axle, and it won't let it center up. So you need to lift it by pulling down on this part, and that'll center it up. And then you just push it until it seats just like that. Now come look inside of our differential again, and let's make sure that it went all the way in, and it did. And so you can see there that we have access to put our retaining clip back in place. So just like we took it out, we'll just take that clip, set it right in place, and then push the axle back out. And now that axle can stay in place. And remember, don't be turning your axles until you get this pin back in place, or else your spider gears might fall out. So we've got our axles back in, C-clips back in place. Let me show you. Did I show you how to put the C-clip in? We've got our axle back in, and then you just take your C-clip, which you took out earlier, and just slide it in place, just like it came off. And then push the axle back out. Make sure that that C-clip is sunk down inside of that spider gear. Okay, now we're going to rotate this to where we have access to our pin again. And so I'm going to grab hold of the drive shaft, just because it's so much easier to turn with the drive shaft. And remember, don't turn your axles, just turn drive shaft, or grab this ring gear right here and pull it. But we'll just turn it to about right there. And what we're going to do is we're going to put our pin back in here that retains the axles and the spider gears, and then we're going to put this retaining bolt back to hold that pin in place. But this retaining bolt had Loctite on it, and so we need to use Loctite going back in. So I'm going to clean this bolt, and I'm going to clean out that hole so that the new Loctite will actually set up. It's time to put our retaining pin back in, and notice that this pin has some flats on sides. Those flats are going to go up against the ends of the axles are going to pinch against those flats in there. And then also you want to line it up so that your hole, your retaining hole here, is lined up for the retaining bolt. So we'll just start going in here just the way it came out. Ugh. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate this just a little bit so that we can see what we're doing a little bit better. There we go. Just got to go through the center of that spider gear. Did my spider gear move on me? Is that why it's having a little bit of a trouble? Let me see. We look in here. Oh yeah, the spider gear moved. So look down, look right through there. You'll see that spider gear dropped down just a little bit. There's a little bit of a lip right there. So something moved on us, and we need to get this thing to line back up, don't we? So let's see what we can do to line those spider gears back up. Let's see if just a slight rotation is going to move it in the right direction. Yeah, slight rotation of my axle is moving that spider gear to the right position. You see how that just went through? There we go. Now we can go ahead and finish this out. Let's go ahead and let me rotate it again so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so we're through our bottom spider gear, and now it's trying to go between our two axles. And it's a little bit of a tight fit right there, so I'm going to get something to tap it through with. Got a rubber mallet here. We don't want to booger up this pin, so let's use that rubber mallet a little bit. It does not want to go through. Why are you being so difficult for us? All right, so it's time to put this pin back in. So you just want to make sure that you line up your retaining hole with where the retaining bolt goes. So you just come in from below here, and then it'll get to where it's right between the two axles, and you might need a little leverage, as I'm doing here, and you want to kind of push the axles apart a little bit if you have to. Get in here a little bit, push those axles apart while you're pushing on the pin. Let's see if I can push this one in a little bit on this side. Oh, didn't want to rotate my spider gear. Trying to find a point where I can get some leverage here. There it is. Okay. That's what I needed. I just needed it to go between those two. Now, let's go ahead and rotate this back to where you guys can see what's going on. And we'll push that pin all the way through. There we go. Again, we're lined up. And now you'll notice that it stopped right there because it's in the flats. The flats are sitting against the ends of the axle. We just need to drive it all the way home through the second spider gear. I might have to tap on it with a hammer to get that done. So let me get this thing rotated to where I can do that. There we go. And I'm going to tap on this end with a rubber mallet just to see if I can get it to drive on home. There it goes, right there. All right, cool. Okay, so now we have that thing almost all the way home, and we're going to go ahead and finish tapping that in just like this till it's almost flush like that. And we get our retaining bolt, put a little bit of Loctite on that retaining bolt. You want to slide that in there, and when it's in the right place, it'll fit right down in to that pin. And if it's not in the right place, push it back your way a little bit until that drops in. Let me see if I can get my hand in here and push it back this way a little bit. No, can't push it by hand, so I'm going to have to rotate it again and move that one more time. Takes a little fiddling back and forth, guys, obviously, but just take your time. You know that it's not too bad once you get everything lined up. All right, so now we're ready to finalize, push this the rest of the way home. And you can see we've got that hole lined up just with where that bolt goes through, the retaining bolt. Got a little bit of Loctite on my retaining bolt, so I'm going to set that through just like that, and then I'm going to push this to where we can get that bolt, retaining bolt, to go into it. Now that retaining bolt should go home, but it's acting a little finicky. Let me see if it too needs just a little bit of persuasion to go in there and sort of line up. Let me see if I can get something that wedge it in there just a little bit. You don't want to put much force on this, I'll tell you guys. There we go. But just a little love, and it was all it needed to get that to slide in there and move that pin just where it needed to be, because the hole is chamfered. It'll orient itself correctly. And now we can get our 3/8 gear wrench back on here and tighten this thing down. And the torque on this little retaining bolt here is 20 to 30 foot-pounds, so not a ton, just enough. And with that Loctite in it, that's never going to come apart again. So let me rotate this one more time so we can see everything is lined up. Just double check and make sure. So this pin keeps our axles from coming in, and then ultimately these C-clips from falling and them to go flying. Then the spider gears are in place. Everything looks good here. And so we are ready now to clean up this surface here and the surface of our cover and glue them back together with some RTV. And I've got a new gasket that goes on here as well. So now we need to clean these sealing surfaces up. And so you want to, get all of this old RTV off and kind of rough up the surface just a little bit, get it ready for the new RTV. And so in doing so, you're going to probably make a mess, and you don't want all this little bits of plastic basically going inside. So try to protect the inside of your differential with something. A couple of red rags or something will work just fine. I just happen to have this pig mat type stuff handy, so I'm going to stuff this in here and try to cover up the gears and bearings and everything inside of here as best I can. That'll just keep that junk from getting inside of there. And then this old RTV, if you can, sometimes if it's just real smooth surface, you can just kind of rub it off with a rough terry cloth or a red rag like this, and just kind of get all of that old junk off of there by hand. But if you need to, and even though you may not need to, it's sometimes a good idea to get one of these little, like Scotch-Brite discs, and use it kind of like this. Kind of rough up that surface a little bit, and you see how it puts some scratches on it? The RTV will stick to those scratches way easier. And then also, if you got some stubborn RTV or rust or anything like that, this will just knock that stuff right off, just like it's doing here. Makes short work of cleaning up these surfaces. And I'll go ahead and finish this, and then also do the same. All right, so we're ready to go ahead and put our cover back on. We got a nice coating of RTV on front and back side of our gasket here, and we are going to put this up in place. So let's get one of the bolts that holds it in place, set it up and line it up the way it was. Remember, we had these white marks for the ones that had the stud on them, and they were up to the top. So we'll go ahead and get one of these bolts started like that, and we'll get one and stick it on the other end somewhere down here. Doesn't matter which one, just something to hold it in place. And we'll go ahead and grab our studs that had, or the bolts that had the studs, and we'll put them where the white marks are. There's one there. Have it the right way. There's one there. And there's one there. These are all 1/2 inch, and they get torqued down to 33 foot-pounds, I believe. It's all right if you do 35. Ain't going to hurt nothing. 35 is easier to remember than 33 anyway, isn't it? We'll get these started by hand. We'll suck them down with the impact, get some good squish out of that RTV around the edges, and then we'll torque it. Okay, we got them started by hand. We'll go ahead and suck them down. And you want to do it in a crisscross pattern, just so get nice and even. And you don't want to notice I'm just snugging it down. I'm not putting any real force on this. That's the great thing about these variable speed impacts is you can choose how much elbow grease you want to put. There we go. All right, I think they're all snugged down, and we can go ahead and switch on over to our torque wrench. Put 33 foot-pounds on it. There's 33. Here, crisscross pattern. Okay, how about this one? Okay, and this side. We'll just work our way around just like that. Crisscross applesauce, and you can see up here how it's that RTV starting to squish out. You want to see a good even sort of squish out all the way around when you're done. Now that we have the cover on, we're going to go ahead and remove our fill plug here, and that just takes a 3/8 square drive, just the same old thing that fits your sockets. And I like to put the 1/2-inch drive to 3/8 adapter. It just gives a little bit more leverage to break these free. Sometimes they're kind of tough on there. And I'm just going to open this up. We're not going to fill it up yet because the RTV needs time to dry. And sometimes, you know, having a little bit of air moving through the backside and the front side helps it to dry a little faster. But we'll put this back in after we fill this up, but we're going to let it dry for 90 minutes at least. Okay, so it's been about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and as you can see, the squish out RTV here is nice and rubbery, almost volatilized, and so we can go ahead and refill our differential now with differential lube or gear lube. And this truck takes 75 140 full synthetic, and it's already got the limited slip additive in it, so you don't have to worry about adding that. And then it goes in right here where we showed you before, right in that little hole right there. We're going to fill this thing up. And so it takes a couple, 2.5 quarts, I think, or so. You just put your little nozzle in there. Here, let's trade places. Put your little nozzle in there and just squeeze the bag. I like these ones with the bag because it's a lot easier to put it into the differential with the bag than it is with the bottles. So I'm just squeezing all this gear lube, ooey gooey gear lube, into that hole, and it'll fill up. And then once it starts running out the bottom of the hole, we know that we have filled it up enough. There's 1 quart. Let's get the other one going in there. All right, so we're 3 bags in. Let's see about this one. Just going to fill her up. Oh, yeah, there it is. That would be the fill point. Look inside that hole right there. You can see that level probably right there at the bottom of the hole. Yeah, that's good. All right, so we'll let it run out just for a second here. So it took 3.5, not 2.5 quarts. So we've let it run out there until it kind of just, you know, a drizzle left here. And we'll go ahead and put our plug back in. And I put some thread sealant on here. You want to do that. This is a PTFE, that white liquid thread sealer. Just a little bit on there. And then just get that thing started into the hole by hand. Come on now. There you go. There we go. And remember, this is just a 3/8 square drive, like your socket, to tighten that thing up. So let me grab that, and we'll snug it down. Okay. Get this out of the way. Sorry, my hand's in the way. I'll show you here in a second. There we go. You'll feel it get tight. There you go. That's all you need right there. Just till it gets snug. I don't think there's a special torque spec on this, but if there was, it's probably 20, 30 foot-pounds or so. But with that sealant on there, it'll keep it from leaking. And then the only thing left really is to clean up our mess here, check for leaks, and we'll have this job done. All right, so let's do a final check over. I put the brakes back in place, got new pads and cleaned up all the slide pins and everything like that, got those good. Let's check our differential. We just filled that up. We're looking for any kind of leakage or wetness along this bottom edge especially. You can see that that squish out of that RTV is nice and even all the way around. I don't see any leaks here. I want to check for leaks at the bottom of your axle seals down in here. No leaks. This was the one that had the problem that we replaced. No leaks. So good. All right. That was quite the job. But this is something you can do at home on jack stands. You don't need a lift or anything like that. And as you can see, it's just a few little things that you have to take care of. And if you do have to pull those bearings out, just go ahead and get that tool, because that's a lifesaver. Thank you guys for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. And I hope to see you guys here on another episode of The Joy of Wrenching real soon. God bless.